Good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness and the understandings around the lived consequence or lived reality that trauma creates, but I want to delve into all the different paths that are around us and all the ways that trauma changes us and what I've learned over many decades of being around this stuff that I hope is helpful in creating paths of healing and in improving the quality of your lives and also the understanding that you have of what is actually going on. Now, in this video, I'm replying to a comment on one of my last videos that I felt really needed to have. It gave me the opportunity to celebrate the direction that a lot of the research and exploration in the healing and working with trauma is going. And to, in some small little, in a small little way of being part of pushing that emphasis, of changing the old ideologies around psychology and medication dependencies and all these structures into more in a direction that emulates what we would experience if we were placed and stayed and lived in an environment that was supportive. And we healed the attachment traumas, we healed our attachment connections, and we were part of that pathway of belonging. Now, in the comments mentioned about Dr. Bruce D. Perry, and I love the way he moves forward in pushing the understandings that just taking somebody out of a trauma environment doesn't fix it, especially when you're looking at pre-verbal. If pre-verbal is before an infant or young child is able to articulate and speak, the first 12 to 18 months, there's studies are showing that if a child or an infant experiences trauma in the first 12 months, even placed in a completely supportive environment long term after that, there is still the learning challenges. There is still in a survival state, basically a functional freeze state, developed. So the survival state's created within that first 12 months because it's such a critical developmental stage of life. And so much is happening within the brain, the nervous system, and the body that it doesn't just go away. It has to be worked with and deliberately worked with, not just placing in a nice, comforting environment. It needs to actually be pursued and worked with to be able to heal it and change. There was also mentioned Dr. Mona Delahougue, and her work is a lot around the behavioral structures of understanding what are the reasons behind the behaviors that children exhibit when they come and live post-trauma, or when they hit that barrier of I just can't cope anymore. I'm just too triggered today, or there's too much going on. One of the aspects I really like about her work is she really pushes the individuality. One of the things I've said for decades is you will not find two trauma responses the same. You can have 50 people go through an identical traumatic experience and you will have 50 different responses to that experience because there is so much at play. There is the past, there's how they were raised and the structures of attachment and belonging and all that aspect. There's epigenetics, there is physiology, there's so many components at play here. And understanding the individuality of it, especially from a therapist standpoint, is critical. Otherwise, you get those labeled names. Like, for years back in the 80s and 90s, 2000s, ADHD and ADD was the buzzword. And now it's neurodivergent. And once you're classified as that or somebody puts that label on you, you're dismissed, you're dehumanized, and you're put to a side. You're not expected to ever achieve anything. And the resources that should be put into place to actually help you get past and learn and resolve what it is you're struggling with are removed. And you're just basically camped over there till you are somebody else's problem. And she really goes up against those labels and how the DSMs work and all these. The diagnostic criteria is off because it makes so many assumptions. And I agree with that completely. Then you look at Dr. Ross Greene's work, and the collaborative proactive solutions model. Basically working to understand how our behavior is deficit driven, how what survival states and the structures that we've created, our responses, our interactions, our beliefs, and all of this is driven around the deficits created in our traumatic past and how we got through them. And how those deficits, what we feel, drives our behavior. All of these are great. My all-time favorite within the world of research into trauma now is Professor Stephen Porges. Dr. Levine's stuff is brilliant. Dr. Baselli's stuff is brilliant. But Porges, for one main reason, is always going to be my favorite. It's because he's opened the door to scientifically proving what the older races, indigenous peoples, have known for thousands of years, which is, as he coins it, neuroception. How our nervous system reads our environment even when we're not aware of it. How we inherit responses, polyvagal theory. And how the mammalian aspect drives so much of the structures within our physiology, especially when it comes to response and the aftermath of those responses to trauma. Porges has just a way of explaining the unexplainable. He's broken through some of the language barriers, even though I laugh in some of the talks when other people say, "Oh, you can simplify what I'm trying to say," because he has a very complicated way of speaking, but a very intellectual way, I should say, of speaking. But his model with polyvagal theory and how that's branching out now really shows and explains, provably explains, how much we inherit and how the base structures of our mammalian biology play such a critical understanding. And it also has taken the emphasis from cognitive into the vagus nerve, into the body, into cellular responses. And I take that one step further in the regards of where we house the majority of what we would deem as consciousness. I believe is within the vagus nerve bundle. I believe it is within that neuroception component because cells, each of our cells are aware. They're not sentient, they're aware. But when you group enough cells together, you create a level of perspective that feeds consciousness. That is what consciousness is. When you have enough points of view in one grouping, not all the same, creating a complete five-dimensional picture, you create consciousness. That is where polyvagal theory and Porges' work is inevitably heading. It is what indigenous peoples have tried to explain to Westerners for decades. And it is the basis of that belief. And if we understand what neuroception actually is and how our nervous system drives everything we are, that part that senses and interacts and is connected to our environment, we can start to work with it, negotiate with it, to relearn better ways of responding. Now, another component of the direction that research is headed in the way therapy bases are working now. The only issue I have is accessibility. The models that, therapists like the three that I mentioned and a lot of others out there that are doing great work is accessibility. Yes, if you can afford to spend 3 or 4 sessions a week and you have the resources around you to be able to create that safe and secure environment, to be able to access these core structures of survival and start to relearn and grow and change them, awesome. But the majority of people, that especially those that have gone through early childhood pre-verbal complex multiple type model event, the real stuff, the real complex, difficult stuff that everybody likes to put to one side, we don't have the financial resources to even access a counselor. And this is where, as much as the brilliance of where this work is headed, there also needs to be a consideration of perpetrator pays within that component, within our society, to where those that commit harm, their financial resources are taken to fund those that have been harmed. Or when there's an action or a policy in government, such as child removal and adoption, part of the financial structure of that is real world, actual, that is going to benefit supporting those children through the process of placement and post placement to resolve what is being, it's so evident at the challenges it creates. I really love, as I said, the direction this is all going, and it is my hope that it continues. And I also love your guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, and I'll see you all next time. Hope.